My name is Leyton Schnellert, and I am a faculty member at UBC. And today, we're really lucky to have Faye Brownlee, Deb Vanderwood, and Jennifer Coe working with us and sharing their practice with us today. This series, Fostering Literacy in Multi-Age Primary Classrooms, is a partnership between the Ministry of Education, the Rural Education Advisory, and UBC. And we're so delighted that the Edith Landau Virtual Learning Center has partnered with us to make these resources available. In this amazing time of education, primary literacy is a hot topic. And so part of our responsibility is to work across research bodies to welcome and connect to really rich practices and research. And so today we're going to delve even deeper, but we hope that you're checking out the series from last year as well. I'm joining you from Syilx territory, which is the Okanagan. And so fortunate, I was with one of my elders in the meeting right before this. And so I have learned so much about being in this place and coming to understand Indigenous ways of knowing and being and connecting that to my teaching and my practice and how I live my life. And one of the words I just thought I would share that was gifted to me by this elder is Anauchenweek. And Anauchenweek means many voices coming together, that we need each voice and what they bring. And from that gift perspective, everyone has something to offer. And there's not one way to be. There's many ways to be, and together collectively, that's what makes things rich and powerful. So welcome today for a little bit of an Week, where together we come together, share our voices together to solve and explore problems that are really meaningful to us. I have one more slide to share with you. As we developed the series this year, one of the big topics that folks wanted to explore was multi-age classrooms. And so you're going to hear Faye and Deb and Jen, thanks Jen for coming on board, talk a little bit about literacy practice in multi-age classrooms and the potential of that. And so there is significant research about the benefits of multi-age grouping at all grades, but in particular the primary grades. And that we really think together about being in community. There's a concept that I didn't do that slide for this time, but a concept called looping, which is the benefit if I'm a teacher in kindergarten to have those same students in grade 1 and even grade 2, the benefit of me being able to nurture and support those kids and they know the routines and how much literacy growth they have. We do also know that multi-age groupings are enhance self-concept. Kids feel known and connected, and they have more positive attitudes towards school because they feel part of that community. And so those are social and emotional, but also academic benefits. Kids in multi-age classrooms, we see that they tend to move forward and grow academically more quickly. But it does also mean that we need to know our students and what we're doing, because it's a little bit less like in grade 1, we do this. And it's much more like, who are you, Heather? I'm so excited about your trees and your branches and your eagle that you brought with me. Let's build from that. And so we really know in all teaching, we want to do that, but multi-age classrooms, it's really critical that we think less about like, here's the grade I'm teaching and more about here are the learners I'm teaching. And then finally, and you're going to hear Deb and Jen talk about this a little bit for sure, because I saw their slides already, is that multi-age literacy instruction, it also allows for developmental responsiveness. And so we're really, again, growing and building, especially when I get to work with kids over time. I'm seeing where they're at and I'm growing them from where they're at. I use my literacy knowledge as a teacher, but I really look to see what might work for them. And so I'm really excited about my colleagues are going to share their practice today, and I'm just so delighted that you're here, everyone. Our first guest frolic is Faye Brownlee. Passing over to you.
Thank you. And I'm delighted to be here as well and to spend some time with Leyton and the team and to share some of my thinking and some of the practices that I am the good fortune and the privilege to participate in and with these incredible teachers around our province. I am in a different area than Leyton, and I just keep changing the pictures of the land and the water in front of my home. This is last evening. I'm on the unceded and ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and the river, as much as the land itself, the moving parts of the land just constantly remind me of the power of that water moving. through our country and moving through our province, and the peoples who've lived along the water and worked with the water through centuries and centuries, and how it changes. And it looks different all the time as we go today, and it looks differently than it did 1,000 years ago. But it changes the impact of what we do on a regular basis. I would like to, I get to talk about like just really fun things today. And I'm talking about read alouds and daily independent reading. And so you'll notice when I'm talking about the focus, I say the how to, because it needs to be a little bit of the practical piece in here, the power and the promise. So we'll have a little tiny bit of research, and we'll also have a little tiny bit of the piece that says, what does this look like when I'm doing it in my classroom? How do I get this going? So when we think about what we're doing in working with our students, when I'm taking this lens, I'm thinking, so why am I worrying about a read aloud? Why am I spending time on independent reading? And I'm remembering that the reason we focus on the reading aspect of literacy, which is one of the aspects, not the whole thing, is because we're working to create kids who can read, who have the skills to read, but who also choose to read, who have the will to read. And so those pieces, I mean, that phrase, I guess, guides everything that I think about us doing in our classes, are all of these work pieces that I'm doing with my kids, helping create skillful readers who are also willful, thinking, I want to read, I want to read. So some of you will have seen this diagram or chart before. I'm looking at the two outside pieces in this piece. I'm looking at the piece of the interactive read aloud as a way of starting. I want this embedded daily. And in fact, I'd really like it to be embedded 2 or 3 times a day. As it's going on, where we're grabbing a text, we're grabbing some print, we're looking at an image, and we're sharing our thinking of how we're making sense of this with our kids, that interactive read aloud. Now, you'll notice that this has high teacher support and low student control. At this time, as Leyton talked about in a multi-age class, I really need to know my kids, because I'm not just reading a book. I'm reading a book in a way to invite those kids into being a reader with me with the book. And so I need to know my kids. I need to know their strengths. I need to know their stretches. I need to know their areas of interest, because I'm going to use that in my read aloud. This is very, very different than hearing somebody else read something on a YouTube video, because they can't interact. That's a key word. They can't interact with my kids. They don't know my kids. They can make it sound good, and I can hear the authenticity of their voice, but this is a teaching time. And so it's more than just hearing the authenticity of an author's voice. It's about using your voice to help invite kids in to that reading process. Equally daily, I want to whoosh right through to the other end of the chart, and I want to make sure that there's independent reading, because at this time, kids are getting to try out and practice what they've been learning in my interactive read aloud. And at that time, they're the ones with control, and I'm looking for low teacher support. So this isn't a one-on-one tutorial. This is choosing your text and working with it, and me moving around and having quick mini conferences with the kids as they go. All of this, as James Britton said decades and decades ago, all of this student reading and writing is floating on a sea of talk. So it's an oral time. It's interactive. Kids are talking to each other. I'm talking with the kids. We're sharing our thinking. It's not clean cut. This is well, it never could possibly be with young learners, a silent reading time. We'd like it to be a quiet reading time so that others' voices aren't interfering with our thinking. But it's hard to resist the sharing piece that comes through. And it's really about murmuring voices and quiet voices. Everything we do in literacy is looking at that moving in control and shifting control from the onus from being with the teacher to the onus being with the child, and the child gaining more and more expertise, whether it's in reading or in writing or in oral language, as they practice as they're moving through. So a brief research piece is thinking about moving to some of the literacy leadership briefs that come from the International Literacy Association. And one of their pieces, and it's where I've borrowed the power and promise phrase from, is thinking about why are these pieces important? Okay, what are the things we need to think about? So in read alouds, they're reminding us that it's a variety of genre. Okay, so it's all kinds of different text. And there's big purpose in here. When we read aloud with kids, we help them build their word knowledge and their world knowledge. And so it takes them beyond the experiences that each individual brings into the classroom. It networks the thinking of the kids in the classroom, and it exposes them to new words, new language, new vocabulary, new experiences. And within that is that complexity of the instruction, right? What am I know? Who am I? What do I know? What do my kids need? In the independent reading, we're looking at self-selected text. Okay? This isn't a time where I need my kids in controlled vocabulary text. It isn't a time when you have to be reading at your right level. You get to choose. Now, part of your choice is I'm helping to make sure that the text keeps you engaged, because if you're just spinning on the carpet holding a book, or using it as a platform, that's not actually independent reading. And so that's my job, to help you find something that does engage you and helps you interact with it. But the self-select, the choice is really, really important. As I mentioned, I'm moving, I'm chatting with the kids as they're going, and I'm trying to make sure that I interact with each child with the belief that the child is a reader and they're working to make sense of the text they're working with. And my job is to support that authentic conversation and do a little teaching in there to just stretch them a little bit more. I love the quote, the best readers are those who read the most. It's that with almost any skill, we don't get better if we never have practice. And so we want to look, I don't like the poorest readers phrase, but we want to look at those kids that we don't yet see as sophisticated readers. They're emerging, they haven't yet discovered the joy and the information power in looking at text, and support them in becoming the readers we know they can be. One more tiny piece of research to put in here is thinking about that power of vocabulary. The numbers, when you see them, are mammoth. So this is coming from the UK's reading framework, and some of the research they have in there is quite interesting and coming from different points of view. I particularly liked this one when they looked at a study, the number of words that kids are exposed to before they come to school, words that are popular in board books, picture books. Kids who are never read to at home are exposed to approximately 300,000 fewer words. Think of the difference that does to your ability to participate in the classroom, in the environment, and the school language that goes around if you haven't been exposed to those words. And it's not about a better home and a less better home, but it's about what's the language like in the home, and what kind of experiences are they getting, and how are kids set up for success when they come in. That 300,000 words is a massive number. And so when we get everybody in there and they've got all these different experiences, and coming from different language backgrounds as well, we want to be building, continuing to build on that language, to open more doors for kids as they're coming through. The other piece that we really want to keep remembering, that reading is more than just fluency. It's more than just reading words correctly. It's about making sense. We need to be making sense of the words, but we have to be making sense of the ideas that are presented in text as we're going. So we're reading aloud all the time. We're talking about our books. We're trying to invite kids in to come join me in this community of being a reader. And we do it throughout the day in planned ways and also in incidental ways. I was in a 1-2 classroom this morning, and just before the recess, I saw the teacher look up and I could see the look of, oh no, I've got everybody tidied up. They tidied up a little faster than I was anticipating, which is very good news, but now I have another 5 minutes and we're not quite ready. Grabbed a book, read the book. The kids instantly popped onto the carpet, and you could have heard a pin drop, except when they joined in to help her with the reading. Okay. And it was just like, whoa, we're getting an extra book. One little guy said, it's not even on the day plan because the calendar is up there. And look, here we are getting another one. So just join with me for a moment while I give a really speedy demo of what I want, what I'm thinking about in terms of a powerful read aloud. So, and they don't all have to be brand new, okay? We all know Tacky, okay? Here's one of the reasons I like Tacky. Tacky talks about being unique. Tacky talks about how to be a good friend. Tacky talks about how we can constantly be surprised by somebody's behavior that we think is not going to fit into the pattern that we want it to fit in, like all the rest of us. And oh my gosh, don't they turn out to be the best person ever? Well, in this case, penguin ever. Now, the kids all know Tacky. I said to this group of kids today, if I'm going to talk to some teachers about reading a book to kids, and I want it to be about how everybody's important and everybody's special, when you look around, and they've been doing lots of work on kindness and belonging and getting ready to be really good friends for Valentine's Day, what would you read? They said, oh, Tacky. Okay, I said, I'll take Tacky, because here's what it is I know. They look at this, they relate to it, and they're happy to have it read more than once because they can read it and think about different things as they go. But here's my starting point. I'm looking Tacky the penguin, and I'm looking at the beginning and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this must be a fiction story, because I don't think penguins, when they're living in penguin land, are dressed like that. So already I'm thinking, I already know stuff about this book because I think this is going to be make-believe. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, well, and Tacky is like particular. I guess this is Tacky because that's his name, because it says it up top, Tacky the penguin. So already the author's telling me something. And look at that, Tacky. I guess Tacky must mean kind of funny and weird clothes to be wearing, because I don't know. I don't really know what Tacky means, but that would be my guess when I look at this piece. So let's see what happens. Oh my gosh, when I turn, there's Tacky doing somersaults. Okay, I don't think I've ever read a story about penguins doing somersaults, but oh, I feel so much better. This first page has a penguin where I think it's supposed to be, on ice. There once lived a penguin. His home was a nice icy land he shared with his companions. Companions, I think that might be words for friends. His companions were named Goodly, Lovely, Angel, Neatly, and Perfect. Oh, they seem, when I look at them, to be quite different. Then he looks over here. Did you notice that? Are you already thinking about how many other ways he might be different? Okay, and I can keep reading. Now, notice the piece, I'm talking. The kids are nodding, they're helping me out. They're finding things as they go. Notice how that compares to when I'm doing the same thing and I'm reading about coral reefs, because it's something that we've become interested in our class. So when I'm starting now, I'm talking about, this is a book that's nonfiction, and there's some things we know about nonfiction books. So we can talk a little bit about what do we know about coral reefs, what kind of questions have we got, and then we can start and just look, we can analyze the picture, but here's something I really want to start about. Let's look at the table of contents, because here's really important news about nonfiction books like this with the table of contents. We don't have to read from the beginning to the end. We can think about what were we curious about, what are we wondering about, and we could read down this table of contents and see if we can find where it's talking about our question. And then we could actually look where it says here, ooh, 6 cool facts about coral reefs. And we didn't think we knew very much, so maybe we want to start with finding out some things about coral reefs. Let's start right over here. And we just run down and we think this could answer our question. It starts on page 22. We could skip right over to 22 and read here. Isn't that amazing? A book that you don't have to read from start to finish. But we might find we've got more things we want to find out and go back to the beginning and read from the beginning. And then we talk about this too. But in our read alouds that we're doing every day, more than once, we're talking about some of the big thinking about reading as we go. And we're talking about the content and the ideas. The one other piece that we're talking about in here, well, it's not just one, but another piece that we're talking about is I'm thinking about who the kids are in my class and what are we working on in terms of decoding skills. And so if we've been doing some work around how do vowels get to say their own name, I might start by even just putting, before I've even shown this, putting the word reefs up and saying, I wonder if we can figure out how to decode this word. What are some patterns in here that we know? Okay. How would we do the first sound? How would we do the last sound? What do you think those two E's, when they come together in a word, might sound? Are there other words that follow that same spelling pattern? What about an eel? Well, when we put that in here, let's think about some of the other words and some of the patterns. Now, I'm not doing it with all the words, and I'm doing it with one pattern or two patterns as we go, because those little inserted pieces where we're talking about how we use some of those phonemic awareness skills and other decoding skills that we've got in context help immensely. The other piece that we think about, so there's my little books that I'm looking at. I also want to think about that other piece when we look at the independent reading. And there are pieces in here that, again, I want to be thinking about making this work during the day. And it's not that you just sit and read. As you're reading, I'm moving around and I'm having little quick conferences with the kids. Okay. Now, I'm thinking about when does this happen? I want to have a scheduled time where we're going to be reading books of our own choosing, and we talk about how we choose a just right book and a book that we're interested in. But there's other times when it just becomes an opportunity to read. It can be one of the things you do as a soft start. It's something, oh my gosh, you finished? You could actually get a book and you have a few minutes that you could read. You might want to choose a partner to come with you when you're reading as they're going. So we've got an official time, a scheduled time. I'm looking at 10 to 15 minutes of scheduled time as I'm going. We're in there, and I might follow up my 10 to 15 minutes with another 10 minutes of official buddy reading, where we're actually sharing with one another and we're changing our partners and talking about our books and reading to each other. And then sometimes once or twice a week, we might sit together in circle. And after we've had a buddy read and share something about a book that one of our partners has read. So we're not just getting airtime for ourselves, we're getting airtime based on what we've done when we were book sharing with somebody else. So we're building in those connections among kids as we're going all the time. As I'm moving around, I'm really working on having a strength-based conference. And these are really mini conferences. So sometimes it's a minute, sometimes it's 2 minutes. I'm trying to touch base. Colleen Politano used to call these butterfly conferences with as many kids as possible. And my goal is by the end of the day, I've listened to everybody read something to me, just in a one-on-one piece at some point during the day. So they might have read something that they were doing when they were working on a math word problem. They might have read something to me from their independent reading. They might have read something to me when they said, hey, you know what? I went and I got tacky and look what it says on this page. And they're going back to a book that we've had in a read aloud. But trying to touch base, because that little window in gets me to notice what the child is doing as a reader and give one little piece that recognizes the strength they're doing, gives me information to guide my teaching next, and helps me move them forward just a little bit in their reading. So trying not to make this into a big tutorial, trying not to skip my kids that I'm not worried about and only listen and conference with kids that I am, because everybody needs the conversation. One of the reasons that I believe that that our kids develop to be good readers is because they know that talking about what you're reading counts. Is an interesting thing to do. It's a sharing thing to do. And kids who aren't getting that same kind of interaction with text don't know the power of being involved in that conversation as they're going. So I mentioned this, 10 to 15 minutes, 10 minutes of buddy reading, getting together to share some as we're going. And if I'm new to this, I'm starting off by thinking about how do I actually have that conversation? What is it going to look like? And there's lots of books written and articles written on how to have a reading conference. And I just think it's always important to try and make this as easy and accessible for us as teachers. So we're thinking this isn't intimidating to do, but it's possible to do. So essentially, this is what I'm thinking about in a conference. What are you reading today? Why'd you choose that book? Okay. We can talk about the beginning especially if I don't know much about the book, or if I don't think that this might be the best match for the child that I'm talking to. So I need a little bit of information because I want to give the benefit of the doubt to the child to say, so why did you choose that book? Let's talk about the beginning. Help me catch up to what you know about this book already. I want them to read a little bit to me because that allows me to notice what the decoding sounds like, what the fluency sounds like. Are they reading like a reader? It also allows me to see if and when they stumble on a word that might be challenging or just takes a little more work to come by. This gives me a chance to talk about how they figured out the word, because they might do really well on some of my more isolated practice that I might be doing with some sounds and symbols and, all of the work that we all work so hard on. But the important piece about that is what that looks like when you get to be reading. Right? So you can count syllables and clap syllables. If you can't find syllables when you get into the reading piece, then it's not transferring, and it needs to be transferring. So I'm talking about what's happening in the comprehension, the understanding, and I'm trying to find where's my piece that I'm going to come in and talk about the words, the vocabulary, the understanding of the words, but also the decoding. And I really want to be authentic in what I'm doing. Now, picture your kids. If they know you're a moving target and you're coming round and talking, they start saving places for you so that when you come by, they're ready to read to you on the place that they most want to talk about. So let's just have a little boo at Lucas here. Lucas is reading from Elephant and Piggy. At the beginning of the year, he was still working to kind of solidify the letters of the alphabet, and is very proud of himself as a reader. And I'm going to start him, but I don't want him to start there. I want him to start quite through here.
Oh,
So
to stop it.
listen to what it sounded like.
A reasonable way to respond? No. To get mad like that? No. I wonder why they did that. Why do you think Piggy got so mad?
Because he's broke this so far.
Oh, he broke his heart. I better have that printing that's so big, doesn't it?
And sad. I am mad and sad. I am sorry. You are sorry, very sorry.
You think that will help?
No,
Oh,
I don't care. I do not care. You toy is broken.
oh my gosh.
And you broke it.
Uh-oh, can we stop for just a moment? I can't believe you didn't used to like to read at all. You're just zooming along since I last saw you. Okay, can I see if I can trick you on that page? Can you find me a word in there that says broke? How did you know that was broke?
Because I found it.
Did you have a strategy for finding it? What was your strategy?
My strategy is if you broke something like a koi, then that's unhelpful. But if you say sorry, you don't say I don't care.
Oh, I see. That's right. Can I look back here at broke again for a moment? Are there any vowels in that word? What's that one?
Bro,
It is. And what's the name of that vowel?
bro.
Yeah, there's an O in there, isn't there? And it says it's named because of the silent E at the end. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna see if you can trick me just for a moment. Let's see. There. See if I can find a word. See what my strategies are.
Can you find sad?
Sad. I think it's gonna start with the sounds and add the D. I think it's gonna be this one. Am I right? Do you want to ask me any questions about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And are there any vowels?
I think there's a vowel. I think it's the A vowel, and it's saying the sound A. Was I right? Good team.
Now, you see, now this is contrived, right? Because I've taken him out of the room so I could actually video him. And then, of course, the kids all walked by on the outside to make it noisier as we started, which is standard of what happens. Notice how his style is he's going very much from the understanding. And I'm pushing on the piece because I know, and he's got the book memorized, right? Because this is his favorite book, and he is motoring through every Elephant and Piggie book that's in the classroom and reading them again and again and again. But when I have my conference with him, I'm not going to say always, though I will from time to time, how about we try something else? Because you're such an expert on Elephant and Piggie, but he's finding joy in this piece, and he's liking the fact he knows he's better and better and better, and he likes to read this to other people. But when I'm conferencing, I don't want to just talk about that, because I want to see what he's doing with some of the more discrete word skills. And so that's and did you notice what he did? Can you find the word broke? Yes, here it is. And what do you know about it? It's broke. And how did you know it was broken? Can you find, he immediately pointed to the O for a vowel, but then can you tell me something about the vowel? It's broke, right? So he's having a hard time to drill down, but he's using it, but he's also using it because he's practiced it a lot. And so to have him have more executive control with that, I need to have a little bit of conversation in here about the vowels. But notice what he does, and I'm thinking, oh, Lucas, thank you. When I say, can you trick me and find a word? And have you any questions? Yes, he'll ask me a question about a vowel, right? Which is that piece of thing, it's something else now that he's holding in his head as he moves through, which is critically important to be doing. Okay, I want to get away from him for a moment, because I want to take just a moment to look at this different reader, and we're going to have her just watch her for a moment as she's going, and I'll see if I can get her. She takes a long time before she stumbles on anything. She's reading Rabbit and Bear, and has lots of understanding in what she's doing. And she moves her bookmarker to each page as she goes, because she wants to make sure that she's absolutely on point with what she's doing. Okay, let's see if we can get her to go.
So what book are you reading from?
Rabbit and Bear.
It's quite.
And looking at the nice view.
He is, isn't he? And he's seeing all those mountains.
Yeah.
Mountains upon mountains. Do you think Rabbit is used to being up in that tree?
No.
How did he get up there?
Because he's holding on to Bear's back.
And Bear took him up there because of woodpecker? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. You know what I noticed? You had a strategy going on there that was really what good readers do when they're reading. And you came to this word right here. What's that word?
Suede.
And you figured it out. Like I noticed you paused for a moment, and then you did some things, and then you figured it out. How did you figure it out?
Because it has suede in it, and it's like suede.
It is. I noticed that. That really showed that you were thinking as a reader. So if this is the tree, can you make it sway?
Yeah.
What would you do?
Use the wind.
Use the wind. And what would happen to my hand in the tree? Can you move my arm to show me it's swaying? Okay, so it moves in the wind.
Yeah.
It does. All right. Thank you very much. I wonder what's going to happen. I hope they don't fall out of that tree. Do you think they're going to want to go to those mountains?
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay, you can tell me next time. Oh, you're good. You can tell me next time. So, what book are you?
So the piece that I want you to think about in Olive is that she's self-corrected. She sounded out swaying as she was going. And then what does she say when I ask her about her strategy? She said, well, it had the little word way in it. Okay. But I also want to check and see if she has any understanding of what sway means. And she's figured it out, and it's because of the wind, and it's going to move, and on she goes. So when you think about these conferences, now again, I pulled them out. We've taken 2 or 3 minutes. If I'm moving around in the classroom, I'm just going pop, pop, pop by kids, but that's my piece. Read to me, talk to me, act like a reader. I'm acting like a reader. We're talking about the book you're reading, and I'm also infusing some word piece in there. If I want it more, if I want to collect some data as I'm going, this is a form we sometimes use, but I don't want you leaving thinking I have to fill in a form every time. I might do a spot check and use this to help organize my thinking as I'm going, but I'm constantly moving around, meeting these kids all the time, so that they're used to having conversations about text, and I'm finding out about them as I go. So here's your chat room insert. Okay. Think about reading aloud to your kids daily, more than once, and independent choice reading daily. And here's a moment, grab a book and read. What resonates with you, connects to your thinking, connects to your practice? And what are some things that might have sparked your thinking that you're thinking, I might be able to try. I wonder about, I can grow this practice by. I think I've got something I'm liking even more than what you talked about there, Faye. And here's an idea that other teachers might be really interested in finding out. So
While people are replying, I see there's one question in the chat box where Lori's asking about our most emergent readers.
I know, and I was just typing in a little response. My response is grab a book. So I'm all of our classes, right, have a full range of kids. So I want you to still be included, and I'm still going to talk to you, but what we're going to talk about is what you're seeing in the pictures, what you're creating as the meaning around your pictures. But I also want to then to take that piece and say, well, if this was about Piggy, and let's think about how Piggy starts, and I may have to help with that. They may not have any of, even knowing that the P and P are going to be at the beginning, but I've got my alphabet chart with me. Here's the P. I wonder if we can find a P on this page. Oh, look, there's Piggy, and there's the whole word Piggy. So I'm going to lead, so I'm doing one little sound, symbol, alphabet principle piece in there, but talking about this is still about meaning making as we go. Okay, Leyton, I think we're time for me to stop sharing and move on.
Thank you, Faye, for bringing us rich practice, helping us connect to what we do, and just deepen the things that we're already doing in our classrooms. I'm delighted that Deb and Jen are willing to share with us this time. I've had a chance to work with Deb in and out over the years. In fact, I think the first couple of times I met Deb, it was through her examples, because she'd been doing some work with Miriam Miller around social learning, the youngest grades. And as I mentioned, Deb is a helping teacher in her school district, so a coordinator, the literacy coordinator in SD 43, everyone, Coquitlam. And Jen teaches a magnificent K1 classroom. Sometimes it's hotter and warmer than others. And I'm not just talking about the teaching, everybody. And Jen and Deb, we're just so grateful that you're going to share some of the work that you've been doing together to help us, again, build our practice in the primary years.
Just before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that Jen and I are sitting at Coquitlam on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. And we want to thank the Coquitlam who continue to live on these lands and care for them, along with the waters and all that is above and below. Like Leyton said, I'm Deb Vanderwood. I'm actually the early learning coordinator in the district, but I work really closely with our literacy team, or I'm part of the literacy team in our district. And Jen and I have done some work in writing this year in her classroom of K1 learners, and we're going to share some things we learned and share some of their work with you. So we thought we would just start by sharing what some of our beliefs are around multi-age classrooms. Both of us have taught multi-age classrooms many times. And these are some of our beliefs that guide what we do. We know about our student strengths and stretches in relation to the curriculum, and we use that to guide our teaching. So it's really important that we know who our learners are and where they are in their learning. We really believe that it's important to teach all students in the class. So it doesn't matter, how, where they are in that continuum of learning, whether it's in the range of their grade that might be expected in their grade or not. We really make sure that we have opportunity, that all students have opportunity to learn from what we're doing. We also know that our goal is to further the learning of all students, no matter where they are in relation to the curriculum. So we're going to just keep moving them forward in their learning. And again, assessment is key to what we do. So that assessment piece is really important, and we are continually assessing as we're working with the kids. And that's really what's guiding our instruction.
In my class, I have 19 students. It's a K1 class. It's made up of 14 grade 1 students and 5 kindergarten students. In it, there's also 2 low incident students and 5 students with English as an additional language. But I thought what's interesting with Deb, when she came in, she mentioned often that she didn't know the difference,
I
whether they were.
still don't know. Yeah. So we've been working, I've been going into her classroom since the beginning of October, about once a week to do writing with her class. And I still, to this day, don't know who's in kindergarten and who's in grade 1. Jen doesn't address them that way, or there's no identifying markers on their desk or anything about who's in what grade. So I think it's just like any grade. I think you teach a wide range and you teach to the kids you have in front of you. When we decided we were going to work on some writing, it was actually, I kind of initiated it. I had been doing some reading of some Matt Glover's books on writing with young children. What I really liked about that first title was he focuses on preschool to kindergarten, and that's sort of in the early learning world. That's my who I kind of tend to support teachers with. And then I was given an opportunity to go and hear him speak in person through Poppy. And there were some ideas that really resonated with me, not only I think mostly because they were ideas around instruction and writing that I really believed in and that I had heard other people talk about, like Faye. So those ideas were very similar, but he also made explicit some things that I hadn't thought about or didn't realize why I was doing what I was doing. So some of the ideas that really resonated with us were that all children have stories to tell. So no matter if they can write them down with words or just through pictures, that celebration and that honoring of all their stories to tell is so important. And just giving them time to recognize and listen to the stories they have to tell is so important. One of the things that Matt Glover talks about is the importance of building on children's compositional thinking. So I always talked about, as a teacher, learning about what my students' understanding of story grammar was. And this is just that piece relating it back to writing and seeing that link is I want to know what my children's understanding is of that, how they can talk and tell stories like a writer. Also, we really believe that children need to be taught to read like a writer. We're going to talk a little bit about this in some slides ahead. He also talks about the importance of giving children nudges versus pushes. So just those instructional pieces that help them get to the next step ahead of them, not the next 10 steps, or, making sure that you're nudging them just enough that it's within reach, and that it's a reasonable goal. And then there's also a difference between teaching and correcting and teaching and immersing, or teaching and just getting them to do something. So there's the time for instruction, and it doesn't always just happen by having them just write. And also the importance of choice. You're going to hear us talk about it a lot through the next slides. And I also really liked how Matt talked about honoring approximation. So really looking at the strengths that a writer has and building on those, and not just looking at what the writer is showing us that they can't do. Okay, so we thought we would just talk briefly about how we use the curriculum in a multi-age classroom. I really like the continuous view because it shows the competencies and the content and the big ideas of each grade sort of close together. So you can see really clearly the similarities and the differences. That being said, we use the curriculum, we know what the curriculum is, and we have it in the back of our minds when we're planning our instruction, but really what the driver is when we're planning and making those decisions is the students. So the students are really at the center of our decision making. We need to know what they're able to do in relation to the curriculum. But if they're nowhere near the curriculum, like those outcomes, or if they're way beyond, we are still going to teach them and give them those nudges to keep moving them forward. Okay, so we're going to start talking just a little bit about what we did when we started working with Jen's students, and she's going to talk a little bit about what we found out about them.
Well, like with any classroom, my multi-age classroom has a variety of ability levels. A quote from Matt's book said, "Getting to know your students as people and writers is one of the most important things you can do as a writing teacher." I think this is so true. Knowing my students helps me target instruction and incorporate their interests. When we started this journey, we wanted to just see where all the students were at as writers. So we used a mentor text called I Like Me. It had a simple structure the students were familiar with, plus a topic we felt the kids would know a lot about.
Themselves.
Yes. We gave them blank paper and let them go to it. We kept it very open-ended. Our focus was really on that writing process, not having a final product. And from that, when we looked at it and conference around with them, a few things we noticed that emerged in terms of strengths and stretches. In terms of strengths, we noticed most had some strong compositional language. They all were super excited about the book making. Some students were independently labeling their drawings, and a few were adding some simple sentences. And they all enjoyed listening to the read aloud, and they were very engaged. Some stretches that we noticed emerge were figuring out how to apply their developing letter sound knowledge into their writing, making that connection between the speaking part, because we've done a lot of oral phonological awareness activities, and applying that and getting those words down. Also learning the difference between a word and sentence. Many started with labeling and how to grow that labeling into writing more words and sentences and matching their spoken word to their written word. We're trying to encourage them, give them little nudges to lengthen their short, simple sentences and take risks with their writing. And we also noticed that many of them were still working on applying simple punctuation and uppercase letters appropriately.
Especially those grade ones.
Yes,
I've
had.
Yeah, it was really neat to see the progress as they went about that risk taking, I think, is we noticed.
Writing throughout the day, every day. What really important for kids to grow as writers is to have the time to practice their writing skills. So we find time to write every day, but I think it's important for students to vary the type of writing that they're exposed to. So when Deb came in once a week for a writer's workshop, we were focused more on writing like an author and creating those books and writing from those mentor texts. Throughout the week, we also worked on journal writing, nonfiction writing, usually tied into a science or social topic. We did directed drawings where we'd brainstorm of ideas about the picture and write about them. I do like directed drawings because I find at this young age, it really helps them with their listening skills and develop their fine motor skills. Another thing I use in my classroom is story workshop. More than writing, this is more of an oral experience for them to bring out their oral language skills and develop that sense of story, where the students use loose parts to create pictures and they orally tell about the creation they made. Sometimes it's to another peer, sometimes it's to an adult. Mm-hmm. Later on, we'll work on recording those ideas, but right now it's an oral activity. And then we do word study. We try to find a short time every day to work on word patterns, building words, different spelling strategies, so they can apply this to the writing to help with that writing fluency.
Okay, so like I said, I was going into Jen's class about once a week, and it was for one specific writing block. And so what we did during that writing block was very kind of routine. We kind of did the same routine every time. So we would usually start with a read aloud using a mentor text, and then we would go into a short mini lesson. So it would either be Jen or I writing in front of the kids using whatever that instructional focus was, often trying to emulate sort of what the focus of around writing that we tried to highlight in our mentor text. And then after that mini lesson, we would send them off to do some independent writing or bookmaking. And so it was always, we were giving them an 8.5 by 11 little pre-made blank book. And they had the choice to go and write about whatever they wanted to write about in their book. And then what was really important about that time, though, is we used it to conference with them. And so that was that time to really target instruction. So our mini lesson was based on sort of what we figured the whole class could benefit from. an instructional point around either conventions or composition. And something that we knew everybody would need to nudge their writing forward and had access points. But it was during that independent writing time in our conference that we could really target the instruction to individual needs. And then we always planned to have the celebration of writing through an author's share. We didn't always get there though, because we often found our kids were so engaged in writing that all of a sudden we'd be like, oh, it's time. And usually it was library link. They had to go off to the library bus outside. But definitely we would continue to work on building in that time. And actually it was a little bit easier because often the kids, once we sort of were working on it and over time, they really did start to develop that identity as an author and feel really proud of their writing. So they would ask to share. But it wasn't something that we ended up doing every single time. Okay, so we talked a little bit about some of those things that really resonated and that really guided what we did during our writing blocks together. And one of them was using read alouds as mentor texts. And I really like the way Faye was saying how she's read aloud and learning to read like a reader. We were using read alouds to help our kids develop that ability. I call them our kids now, Jen's kids, to develop the ability to read like a writer, right? So we would often choose an instructional focus and then find a mentor text that we could really explicitly highlight how the author was using that, either that convention or that literary feature, whether it be descriptive words or even where the writing was on the page in relation to the picture or any feature that helped that author communicate the story he or she was trying to tell. So we would highlight it as we were reading aloud, and then we would write in front of the kids either with them or modeling just us with the pen, using that in our writing, demonstrating how we were working on applying it in our writing. When the kids went off, we're going to talk about this a little bit more though, when the kids went off, we didn't demand, or it wasn't a requirement that they write in the same way that the author did. We left it up to them and trusted them that they would take what they needed from that mini lesson and apply it to their writing. That whole idea of the mentor text is, like Matt Glover said, we really like this quote, is to give them a vision for what they're going to try to do. So we really believe in order for kids to learn how to do something, they need to know what it looks like and sounds like. And so that's how we use mentor text so they could have a vision of what a book or a story was to look like. Okay, the other thing with our mini lessons, we really, really believed in the importance of choice as an engaging piece and also as a piece about building their identity as an author. So like we said in the read aloud, we would pick an instructional focus, so either a technique around the craft of writing or a convention. And then we would send the kids off to write while we would conference. And they could choose what to write about or what to work on in their writing. It didn't have to be what we highlighted in the mentor text or in our mini lesson. We totally trusted them that they were going to work on what they needed to work on. However, what we really liked about the conferences was that instruction didn't just depend on what happened in the mini lesson, that it continued through the conferencing. So we really use that conference time to really give those nudges that were very personalized to what we noticed our students doing and what we noticed they needed to do next. And kids really did, some of them took the ideas or the topics and ran with it. Some of them just continued to work on the topics that were important to them. But we really did see their growth and they're applying at different times what we focused on in those mini lessons. And Jen's going to share some of those samples with you later.
Process over product. We really saw the value in the writing process over having a finished product, as Deb mentioned. After each mini lesson, they had the option either to continue on with a previous book that they had started or to start a new one. they were never required to finish one book before a new book could get started. I think this was a huge part of them keeping motivated as writers and really gave them that choice and kept them engaged. Many of them actually chose to go back and used to like to read their old books. One student was actually quite cute. He went back and he noticed majority of his books were about cats. And he said to Deb, you know what? I noticed I write a lot of books about cats. I think I'm going to be an author of cat books. And that was kind of cute. Yes, I think the main thing was that we're teaching the writer and focusing on them and how to grow their craft and not on the writing and the type of writing they need to do. It didn't have to be direction or nonfiction. They had the choice of where they wanted to take it. I think another important part was writing over time. It wasn't a one-time, one and done. It was something that could continue on, and it was very, very open-ended. And I think this gave really good access points for all the different learners and abilities. Some were more focused on the illustrating part. Some were right into the writing part first. The students had choice to where they wanted to take it, as Deb mentioned, and this really built their engagement and kept them motivated. And I think really helped their confidence as writers. They didn't feel, oh, I had to do it this way. They could personalize it and take it the way what they wanted and where their abilities were.
Yeah. And it's not that Jen never does writing with a product or, you know, writing that's published or displayed. But during this time, we really focused on actually the process and not the product. So, you know, teaching the writer, what do they need to learn about writing, and not, it's all about having a finished product that looked a certain way. Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the things I mentioned earlier that really resonated with us was in our instruction, making sure that we gave kids nudges and not pushes. So, you know, just when we know the kids and what their strengths are and what the next step would be, and a step that's, you know, related to their strengths and leveraging those strengths, they were that much more apt to actually apply that and be ready to do that instructional piece. So we really use, like I said before, their independent writing time to conference with students. And at first, we really thought that, oh, this will be great having two of us, because during the conference, you know, one of us could really work on those individual instruction times, and there's two of us in there in case there needs to be some management issues. But what we noticed is over time, the students just became more and more engaged, that there was no need for redirection or management of behavior, or, you know, even, can you come and help me spell? It was very much, they would just be writing and we would move around and go and conference with them. And almost like they were never, you know, like waiting with lots of hands up or anything. It just worked so beautifully. There was a point where we're like, you know, we do have the luxury of having two of us in during that time, but it wasn't necessary. It was definitely something, like Jen said at one point, I could do this and it would not be an issue, just having one teacher in.
I think at the very beginning, the first two lessons, I think that was helpful having you there. But as the kids have grown as writers, and it's been a really easy routine for them to get into,
yeah,
I think that's why they've been able to manage more easily on their own.
That routine for sure. Yeah, and so we just have a picture of Jen conferencing with one of the students in her class, and then we also have a picture of a lesson we did, sort of that was a nudge rather than a push. We realized that the kids, there were so many kids that they were starting to do that emergent spelling, but they were missing finger spaces. So we thought that made really a great mini lesson idea for the next time. And so we did some interactive writing. So there was that gradual release of responsibility. We weren't just modeling, but we had them come up and do some of the writing too. And we did some scaffolding with drawing lines for each word. So when they had a sentence that they wanted to write, we had them count the words in the sentence, and we drew a line for each word. And then we had them read the lines. I would say, just read back your lines. So they would read, and then they would start filling in with their emergent spelling or their and their writing, and that really helped them. And we just noticed right away the kids would take off, and they didn't even need us to help them with the drawing of the lines. They would just start counting those words in the sentence and start. And Jen had worked a lot on that skill, that phonological awareness piece around through her morning message, through her poem of the week, and other pieces. And so it was just another way to connect that reading and writing. Which leads right to the next slide is we really believed in the importance of linking reading instruction and writing. And so at the time when we realized there was a point where, we thought at the very beginning, like Jen said, we knew that there was a strength in the class, like she had been doing some work, like Faye out on some of those skills in isolation around blending and segmenting, around pulling apart words to figure out the sounds and hear the sounds. And they were good at that orally. And so when we watched them write the first couple of writing times we had together, she was a little bit surprised at how they weren't applying those skills. And so she was, thinking, looking at their writing, they had a lot of those letter sound correspondences, but they weren't showing us in their writing. So what we decided to do for the next time was kind of try to make that more explicit to them, that they can use those skills to help in their writing words they don't know. So we did a little game that she does with them around blending and segmenting right before or as part of our mini lesson. And then we did some interactive writing like that slide before showed, and where we had them come up and we together would pull apart the word, record the sounds, put it back together. And that really helped with when they started to go and write. And it was like all of a sudden they realized, oh, I can do that. And that helps me in my writing too. And it isn't just something we do at this time when we're sitting on the carpet. It is something that helps us in our writing. And so the little, the picture on the right with the little guy's hands together is showing how he was clapping out the syllables in a word to record and write, figure out a longer word and how to put that down in paper. And also, again, that piece around linking reading instruction and writing and thinking about reading like a writer. So when we're reading a story out loud, what is the author trying to do and how's he doing it? Okay, so that last piece that really resonated with us that we're going to take to all our writing lessons is that honoring their authorship. And Jen talked a little bit about this in the slides before about how the kids in her class really did start to identify as authors. They really saw themselves as writers and talked about themselves as writers. And so when we're thinking about what we did that led to that, and what are those actions that we do when we're writing, when we're doing writing with kids that help develop that, first and foremost, I think, is that providing choice, right? So they had the choice of topics to write about. They had the choice of whether they were going to finish a book they had started at a previous time or whether they were going to start a new book. They had that choice of whether they were going to finish one or start a new one. We really worked on celebrating the stories they have to tell. So even if it was just really intently listening to the stories they were sharing orally with us around the pictures at the beginning when we started, we showed an interest in that and we celebrated that. And we looked for strengths in that as well. And again, like Jen said earlier, it was teaching the writer, not the writing. So it wasn't that the kids had to fit in their skills or their ability to a certain model of writing we had in mind. We were teaching them where they were at and nudging them forward. The other piece that we kind of went back and forth at the beginning was Matt talked about not scribing for children. And I don't think that we scribe for children, but we would record on their paper, both Jen and I, as teachers, would record underneath on the page what or how they read their story back to us if it wasn't readable to us. So if they, had tried to emergent spell their story, we would write it in handwriting because we both believed it wasn't something for the children. It was for us to remember their story and to document their journey as writers. But when Matt was saying he doesn't do anything on the children's paper, it's their work on the book and on the piece of paper alone. So we thought it was really important to record how the students were reading their story back to us and to remember that for instruction purposes, for assessment. So we started with putting Post-it notes on the back so we could remember. And then we would track if their story changed each time they read to us, or we can track where they were in their sound symbol correspondence and their emergent spelling, all of that. And I think that really led to honoring their authorship. And we didn't write anything on their page. Their book and their story was theirs, and what you saw was their work on there. And so I think we have some ideas of what we're going to do to record that on a place outside of their writing, because the sticky notes are okay, but then they're flipping all over. So we're still working on how we're going to do that going forward, but we're not going to write on their page. So we like this quote because I think it's that piece around honoring approximations that really helps lead to them developing their identity as an author too. That Matt Glover, from Matt Glover's work, he says, as adults, we have to be willing to take a child's piece of writing and see all that the child can do and not what she can't. And in the beginning, it was just, even for some kids, what they could, how they were telling us about their picture. So this little guy on the left, he's reading, he was kindergarten. When we started, he would, just his stories was just through pictures. And then he would orally tell us, and he didn't really have even very much compositional language, but what we knew was he could describe those pictures. He had a sense of what he was talking about, of what he wanted to communicate. And so even just honoring that and moving him forward. So, and then there were some kids that were writing short, simple sentences to accompany their pictures as part of their storytelling. So we celebrated all of it, and we noticed strengths and what all of that was telling us about where the individual students were. Okay, so Jen in the next few slides is going to share some of the writing that her kids were doing. I think most of them are kindergarten, because there's a couple grade ones in there. And so she's just going to talk and show you where they are, where they came from.
Okay, this one student was kind of reflective of where we're at the beginning of our journey. Majority of their stories came through pictures and attaching some letters or some words that they knew to tell their story. One thing, this student, her pictures were maybe a little more on the simple side, but she had a huge story to tell for each picture, and she knew exactly what she wanted to say and tell about it. And then in the next slide, this is where she is now. What was so exciting about it was not only we can notice that she's growing as a writer, but that confidence, because before she'd be like, oh, can you help me spell? Or how do I do this? This she took off and did it independently. She's counting the words that are in the sentence. She had a line for each word that she wanted to write in the sentence. I am at the garden to get a carrot. So initially she was going to write, I can make carrot soup, and wanted to change the idea to make it that her mom made the carrot soup. So which was really cute is she erased the period, added the more lines to accommodate the words that she wanted, add the period at the end, and then wrote those in. So that's really showing us that she's having this understanding of the sense of those conventions. That's fine. Putting spaces between words, championing that, adding some capitals and periods. And I think which is really great, though, that she took the risk in this writing. So it says, I'm at the garden, to get a carrot, so my mom can make us carrot soup. And the picture to go with it. Another example that we found exciting too is how they're trying to, I guess we should talk about book writing was more of a process, applying this to their journal writing. And so this is another student's journal writing, and we really see at the beginning, again, it was more picture and labeling. Now they're adding those conventions and those ideas, half ideas of sentences at the end, really trying to expand that sentence. The raccoon is under the sun. The raccoon is so cute. And that exclamation mark, trying new types of punctuation as well.
We were just excited to see them applying it in other areas, and other times the writing was happening as well.
And then this is an example of a student who another has shown, I think it's been amazing to see the growth through this process. At the beginning, he needed some support to help label his pictures. Now he's confident to write his pictures, draw his pictures, and write his own labels on his own, which was really cute, though. He has the lines and the words that he wanted to sound out, like the word had, he has a little dot to show each of the sounds that he's hearing to put them down.
I think it's
Yeah,
that
I think
piece
it's
too.
exciting, yeah.
Yeah, and that, like, we're Jen's working on those some of those skills in isolation in other contexts. But we know that the purpose of that is so that they can read real text and they could write real text. And so to see them actually applying it, I think is really exciting. But we also learned, like we talked about in that other slide, is that we have to explicitly teach them how to apply it, or oftentimes we have to explicitly teach kids how to apply those skills. When we do unpack it and maybe teach them in isolation, we do have to talk explicitly about how they use it for real purposes and the end goal, which is real reading and writing.
And I think the exciting part was seeing them transfer that
Mhm.
knowledge. They just weren't taken in one context.
I think
Yeah.
this slide also shows how at the beginning he spent a lot of time on his drawing and his coloring because he didn't spend a lot of time on the writing, and then his drawings got a little bit less detailed, but there was way more work put into the writing piece.
This was something else that this is like a learning journey for us too, and definitely a process over product. That initially when we started, we thought, oh, we'll start with books. We initially started with plain books. Then we decided to add a line to separate the pictures from the writing, and the students could choose whether to draw a picture on top and write on the bottom or vice versa. Then Matt's doing a workshop here in Coquitlam, a series. And in his workshop, he mentioned about how he just uses his blank pieces of paper.
And he
And
doesn't
with
fold
fold,
them. Yeah,
yeah.
he just uses them as
He just
8.5
takes-
by 11.
Grabs them and then staples them on the side. So we thought, you know what? That was actually tying into our mini lesson, how we're working on expanding sentences. And if the kids had more room, that maybe they would take that opportunity to expand it. Also, too, it also made sense because it could easily add paper to the back, so they could increase the number of pages if they had more to say. This is a little story from a student about a cat and a mouse and a tot. It says, the cat and the mouse and the tot. The cat and the toddler. The cat and the mouse looked at the cat and the mouse looked at the mouse. Shh, tot and mouse. The cat was with the tot.
And it was
There's-
it was funny today because when Jen
Oh.
came up here, she was showing me, because we were like excited. This is a little Kay who wasn't writing at all at the beginning, and now she's writing stories and we can read them. But she had actually taken a book. It was an Elephant and Piggy book that she was reading during book time. Jen had found it, and we saw that Jen said, I think this is where she got the ideas, because they had the shh and the he, and the sentence pattern was very similar, but with different characters. And so she's reading like a writer even during book time, and when she's choosing, like not just during the read aloud.
And I think this was a great process. Like, I appreciate Deb bringing this idea to me and introducing me to Matt Glover. And as a primary teacher, my main goal is to get the kids excited about reading and writing. And I think this opportunity truly got them excited. And it's a process that we're going to continue on. And it really is, what I like is open-ended, especially in multi-age classrooms. There's access point for all students because of the open-endedness. All students feel successful doing it. And there's a huge engagement factor and motivation factor to write.
We're going to end with this picture because I think this kind of sums it up. We got to the point where sometimes I would go in before recess, sometimes I would go in after recess. And this time was when I went in after recess. And so lunchtime came and they would not stop writing. They took out their lunch and they're still eating and writing at the same time. So we thought, that's half the battle right there, is that engagement and their willingness to write. So yeah, it was, we're really excited to continue and take what we're noticing and continue. We've got lots of ideas for the next sort of nudges and the next pieces of instruction for our mini lessons. But yeah, that's our part.
There's one question in the chat box, which is how often do you have writing blocks, and how long would the writing blocks typically be?
We do, I do, with Deb came in once a week, but I do writing every day. But we do writing as part of language arts, but we also do writing when we do science, when we do social studies. Writing is tied into our craftivities, like when we do like art and stuff like that too. So it's hard to say. I definitely have a writing block in the morning, but there's always these opportunities, like in our writing center to write throughout the day.
Cool. So can I press on that for just a minute? Because I think that's a really important thing to be thinking about, is that it's a little bit like what I was talking about with the read aloud and the independent reading. Here's a structured time where I know I'm going to do it, and then it sneaks in to all these other aspects as it makes sense. When you plan for your writing block, whether it's with your journals or when Deb comes, what kind of time are you planning for that sort of formalized piece?
We usually, I'd say a block, 40 minutes, but we
40
kind of
minutes.
sometimes break it up too, because depending on our schedule, sometimes at this younger age, we're growing and building up our stamina. So sometimes we'll do a short time and then we'll break it up and then we'll come back to it. So we might do, like on our directed drawing days, we might work on the picture and adding details. And then we'll come back, like do something else, come back and do a mini lesson about the writing and brainstorm some ideas. And then they can get back and have some time to do independent writing. So in total, I'd say maybe like, 20 and 20, like a 40-minute block. Sometimes it's together, depending what we're doing. Sometimes it's separated.
Right. And I love the fluidity of that. It's that you're responding again to what the kids need and your teaching goals and moving back and forth. So they're not just sitting there for 40 minutes, but there's all kinds of activity and direct work going on, and then application chances and chances to move and talk with one another and get their ideas down on paper. I have been watching in the chat, and several people have been commenting on the growth that they've seen with kids. And I think it's just such a marvelous piece when we look at those kids. And I'm thinking about your kindergarten kids, especially, who come in eager to learn. It's that I come to school and I'm going to be a reader and a writer in just a couple of days. That so many think, but you just look at that transformation that goes, and the joy and the involvement. And I'm looking at what you're showing us with samples, and we're halfway through the year and thinking, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful to see what these kids look like in June, and how they leave, as with that sense of I am a writer as I go, and where that's going to head, and the foundation that they have, and the integration of the skills into a piece of I'm writing to communicate. I'm always talking about voice and choice, and you could see that voice and choice coming through with those kids. So, and then it's just always the magic of working with others. We started off, and I'm talking about read alouds and independent reading, and you're starting your writing piece by talking with your read aloud and naming it a mentor text. Like it doesn't matter what we call it, but let me bring in other voices and use those to help teach and model for the kids as they move forward. So so many ideas, and just wonderful to see all that. And the other piece in here is that it's just so clear about the multi-aging. It's just not an issue. Right? You're working with open-ended pieces. There's an access point for everybody. There's an extension point for everybody. We're networking our thinking and building on the power of the group as we go. And I think that's just such a huge piece too, in building that community of learners. So thank you very much. And Leyton, I think you get the final word.
Amazing. Thinking about how we can support students to find that engagement and passion, but just how kids need chances to use their sounds and those approximations, right? We build them and we scaffold them and we build them, but they have some ownership. And I just loved it. I can't wait to come back and visit your classroom again, Jen. Just so appreciate how we are explicitly teaching our kids and how we are using those opportunities to scaffold and grow and build. And when there are independent opportunities, the kids have the tools to use in those opportunities to make meaning and share what they're reading and writing. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks for coming.